Hey, hey. All right. Got the home team here. All right, I appreciate it. I feel the love this morning. Hey, I just want to welcome everybody in person and our city online. Thanks so much for joining us today. A special shout out to my friend George. We spoke this week. He's one of our frontline workers, but he works graveyard shift, not able to attend in person. And he was telling me how stoked he is that even now he is sleeping, but later on today he's going to catch the replay of the service. So George, love you, man. Appreciate you watching. If we haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name is Jesse. I'm one of the pastors here at our city, and it's just a great day to be with y'all today. We're in the series called No Regrets, and it is intentionally misspelled for the illustration of the series of talks, this idea that we want to ask better questions so we can make better decisions as individuals. Go ahead and open up your Bibles to Ephesians. We're going to go chapter 5 today. The simplest example of this idea of no regrets is literally this. If you're going to go get a tattoo, some sort of a symbol or a letter or a word, you best get that thing spell checked by 2 or 3 other people. Otherwise, you're liable to end up with something that is permanently on your skin that is a representation of regret, right? And I literally had a friend that did this one time. He got a Bible verse tattooed on himself, and it was the book of Isaiah. I can't remember the exact scripture, but he missed one of the A's. The tattoo artist missed one of the A's. So it was Isaiah, I-S-A-I-H-A. I'm tripping on it right now. It's a hard word to spell, but he dropped one of the A's on it, and I had to point it out. I was like, dude, you got that messed up. So he had to go back the next week, get it covered up, and he turned it into some like shadow on the tattoo, and then got it spelled properly underneath it. But at the end of the day, as a church, our city church, like whether you call this your church home or not, if you're just visiting today, we want you to be able to live your life with fewer regrets. And we think that if you can ask some really intentional questions along the way, that you'll be able to avoid those future regrets before they show up really in your life, glaring at you. Week 1, Pastor Mike opened us up, and we asked this first question, the integrity question. And the question was, am I being honest with myself? And if you were there that week, I would, and if you weren't there, go back and listen to it. He did this great illustration where he said, am I being honest with myself, ... Really? Am I being honest with myself? Well, that's a simple question. Really? Really? Are you actually being honest with yourself? That's the integrity question. Question number 2 is the legacy question. What story do I want to tell? Legacy speaks to this idea of way down the road. What's the story that I want to be able to tell my wife, my kids, my grandkids? What's the story that I want to be able to tell with my life? Question 3 was the conscience question. We did this last week. And the big question is there a tension that deserves my attention? That maybe in the moment, everybody around you is going along with whatever the thing is. It's like, oh yeah, everything checks out, the numbers are good, the spelling's correct, everything looks great. But I have a tension. Well, there's a reason that I have that tension. I better pay attention to it. Maybe I shouldn't get this tattoo. Maybe that's what that is. But in our lives, is there a tension that you feel that even though everything is a green light, maybe it shouldn't be a green light for you? That's the conscience question. And today, we're going to land the plane for week number 4 on the maturity question. I want to tell you a story about me being a super mature person, all right? So, we've told you a lot of stories about our pastors and their interactions with vehicles. I don't know, there's like a theme going along there. Pastor Kellen shared a story about an old truck he had a few weeks back. Pastor Chris has told a couple stories. Since I've known Pastor Chris, I've heard multiple stories of different vehicles in different fashions. The most recent one was about a smog check that didn't work. I'm going to tell you a story about a car and an experience that I had. My first car that I owned, it was my car. It was a hand-me-down. It was my brother's car. He bought it. It was a Honda Civic. I think it was like a 02 silver Honda Civic, stick shift. Like, it was awesome. It was a great first car, super reliable, super great. And I loved being able to drive it around, cruising around town. Super awesome car, right up until I totaled it. And here's the worst part. I was almost done making payments on that car. If memory serves, I had like 2 months left, and it was going to be mine outright. And me, being a super mature person, totaled the car. So fast forward a little while, in that stage of life, I had a steady job. Like I was fairly mature as a young man. I didn't spend too much outside of my means. Like I didn't run a budget, mind you, but I was like, oh yeah, I kind of know what comes in, what goes out, and I was making good decisions. And so I decided it was time for me to get my car. Like the last car, I didn't pick it. I just kind of like took it over. This was my moment when I was gonna select the car that best represented, let me rephrase that best presented who I was to the world around me. Because when I show up at an event in a parking lot or whatever, you're not gonna see me first, you can see my car. That's the gateway in to Jesse Kretzu. And so this was a responsibility to find the car that best presented who all my greatest desires and dreams of who I wanted to be, who I aspired to be, because that's what we do, right? We buy things, the handbag, the jacket, the shoes, like we buy stuff because we want to be the person that owns that kind of stuff. It's like, oh yeah, I own that, and that's the kind of person I am, right? It may not be like you at all, but you buy the thing because you think it's going to tell a story that you want to tell other people about who you are. So I decided that I had to get this car that so perfectly illustrated who I was as a human being. I convinced myself somewhere along the line that I deserved this car. I was owed it in life. I had earned it in some way. I should have it. I probably even convinced myself somewhere along the way that it was smart for me to make the investment in a brand new car, because this was my car. Why wouldn't I buy it new? I don't want any problems with it. I'm gonna have this thing forever. It's gonna be my car. So I just wanna show you a picture of the car that I ended up getting real quick. This is me at a winter camp with my Honda Element, SC Edition. Galaxy gray, the thing was epic. And what this car told, the story that it told, if you know the Honda Element, it was an incredible vehicle. It had clamshell doors that opened up, right? So it's actually super hard to get in and out if you're in the back seat. The driver and the front passenger have to open their door first. But what's cool about it is if you like go surfing, which I wanted to be somebody who surfs. If you go rock climbing, which I aspired to be somebody who rock climbed. If you have a dog or a family, which I aspired to be somebody who lived a life of camping and adventure, this car was amazing. You could open the doors, you could hose the thing out. The back cover for the spare tire turned into a table if you're camping. There's so many amazing things. It told the story of who I was to the world. So I went down to the dealership and I found this car, and it was a hunt, but I found it. I got the exact one that I wanted because this was it for me. And I'll never forget that it was such an exhausting day. My mom was there too. She's here today. And she was there with me. It was the most exhausting day because we finally got the car, and then you know how it is. If you shop for a car, if you've ever done this before, you go from the salesman to the finance guy. That was the most exhausting ordeal of my life. Oh my goodness. This guy was trying to get me to buy all the different insurances, all the upgrades, all the coverings, all the different, every single thing. And I'm just like, I was a super mature person, obviously. So I'm like, oh, I should consider all these things, because if you're telling me these things, this must be true of me that I need to buy these upgrades. And I mean, my mom was a saint, because she thankfully pulled me aside and was like, hey, you don't need to get all these extra things. And she saved me a ton of money on it. And I'll never forget, the finance guy told me, he said, okay, we got it all filled out, paperwork's good, you're good to go. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and slide it in the middle of this other stack of finance paperwork, because technically you can afford the car and the loan, but it's right at the max of your limit. And I don't want them to turn you down for the car that you deserve. So we're just gonna slide this right in the middle. Can you say red flag? Like red flag. Like I wish there was a soccer referee there just throwing the flag on the play, like hang on a second, what is this? What's going on? There should be a problem as to why that paper came to the top of the stack. What's the issue there? But as he said, technically, I could afford it. Here's the problem. That's not a mature way to process decisions. Just because technically I could afford it doesn't mean I should have afforded it. I bought that car, and I love that car, and I had a lot of great memories with that car. I drove in the snow, I got tire chains, I surfed for a minute, and I went rock climbing for a month, and I did all the things of the story I wanted to tell with that car, up until I totaled that car too. It's okay, I'm here in the flesh, I'm good, I'm safe, everybody's safe, it's fine. There were really ridiculous accidents. Here's the problem. Though I could technically afford that car, it ended up trapping me into this position in life because my car payment was such an amount and my insurance, obviously, as you can tell by my track record, was such an amount that at the end of the day, I really felt enslaved to this debt, to this vehicle, to this persona that I had presented of who I wanted to be. And by this point, I had really begun maturing in life, thankfully, finally. And I was making decisions about who I wanted to be long term. I decided I wanted to go into ministry full time. I wanted to work at my local church. I wanted to create a new community of friends. I wanted to get smart people around me and all these different things. I started thinking about what I wanted my family to look like. For a moment, I thought, oh man, I would love, I felt convicted. I was like, I would love to spend some time overseas and do missions work. My older brother Josh does that. And I'm like, man, I'd love to follow in his footsteps a little bit and spend some time doing that. The problem is, at every moment when I thought about these great plans that, in my mind, I would say I had a sense that God was kind of calling me into these things. I know that's unique language for some of us, but it's kind of the conscious question. If you feel something deeply in you, it's kind of nudging you toward it. I couldn't act on those things because of the immature decision that I had made that technically I could afford that car and I wanted to afford that car. But it stopped me from living the life that I wanted to live. Do you see the problem here? When you make immature decisions on technicalities, you will end up inevitably down the road in a position of regrets. The mature question is the thing that we want to dive into today. How do you approach all these different types of situations from a more mature posture? And maybe that's not your car story. Maybe it wasn't a new car, but we all drive cars in some form or another. So let me illustrate it another way. What is the speed limit on the highway here in California, Southern California? 65. How fast do you go? Do you see the problem here? The posted speed limit is 65 miles per hour. The law says that is the maximum speed. There's a minimum speed. You can go too slow and you can get a ticket for that. There is also a space of wisdom that says if it is raining, you go slower. If there's debris on the road, you go slower. If the flow of traffic is moving really slow, you go with the flow of traffic. There's different categories of, this is the max you can go, but you could and maybe should go these other speeds, depending on weather and all these different things. Now, thankfully, Southern California, we don't really deal with that too much, but I grew up on the East Coast, and there was rain and snow and sleet and wind, just craziness, and so you have to have those boundaries, right? But the problem here in Southern California that I've come to realize is that we all go 85 when it's raining. And we have no oh yeah, it's great. Because here's the thing, technically, I don't think I'm gonna get pulled over and get a speeding ticket. Yes, the posted speed limit is 65. But if we're all going 85, they can't get us all, right? Can't get us all. Man. I mean, let's be honest. How many of you would be honest today and just say, yeah, I probably go a couple miles per hour above the speed limit? And we rationalize this, right? This is a common way of thinking. Oh, you're allowed technically to go 10 miles over. You're allowed technically 15 miles. As long as you're behind a cop, you can go whatever speed you want, right? And that is an immature way of processing life and decision making. It will not get you to where you want to go. We choose the speed that we're convinced allows us to break the law while avoiding an encounter with the law. So we don't obey the law, but we just pick the speed that we think will, like, this is okay and I won't get arrested for this. And if I do, oh, well, it's just, it was an emergency. I had to go fast, I was running late. It's whatever the problem. So what's my point today? Our natural tendency is to live as close to the line as possible. It's the line between legal and illegal. There's a line between what's responsible and what's irresponsible. There's a line between what's moral and what's immoral. There's a line between what is ethical and what is unethical. And what we've convinced ourselves is that as long as we stay away from the negative side of things, technically, I'm okay. The problem is, the more technicalities that you put in place, the line actually begins to move. And what you find acceptable and permissible in your life moves until you're so far on the other side of the line, you're like, oh man, maybe 5 years ago I would have thought this was immoral, but today I'm rationalizing it. Technically, they deserve that. They had it coming to them. It's okay for me to do this because they did that, and that's the thing, and the line just moves little by little by little. We make this big assumption that guides all of our decisions. If it's not wrong, it's all right. If it's not illegal, then it must be permissible. If it's not immoral, then it must be acceptable. If it's not over the line, it's fine, right? Should be good. Essentially, we're asking ourselves the question, how long can I go? How close to bad can I get without actually being bad? How close to wrong can I get without doing technically something wrong? We try to get by with as much as we can without being grounded, without being embarrassed, without being broken up with, without being left, without being expelled, without being fired, or being kicked out of the house. As close to that line as we can get, that's still safe, technically, and that's where I'm going to set up camp. That's where we live. It doesn't stop there, though. Before long, we're asking, how far over the line can I go without getting caught? Or, here's the real problem, how far can I go without experiencing negative consequences? Because we don't like consequences. Parents in the room, you tell your kid, oh, do you want a consequence? No, they don't want a consequence. But they also don't want to be told no. So as adults, mature adults, we go as far as we can go before we think the consequence is going to be waiting for us. How unethical, how immoral, how insensitive, how long can I neglect my family, my finances, my health without feeling the negative effects? How much can I indulge in addictive behavior without actually becoming an addict? I'm not technically an addict, right? Technically, it's a slippery slope. And it all begins by asking the wrong question, the question that we ask. I would call it the immature question. Is there something wrong with this? That's the basis for our decision making so often in life. Is there something wrong with this? And that's the ultimate answer. Little shoulder shrug. Soon after, if you lead with the question, is there anything wrong with this? You will find yourself asking the question, how did I get myself into this? And so today, my goal is to help all of us build a framework to be able to ask good questions first, so that we can end up with good decisions. And then much further down the line, we can end up with fewer regrets in our life. And I'm convinced today that if you will ask good questions, if you will answer honestly, then act upon those answers that you honestly answered, you'll be set up for success in life. But you got to do those three things. You have to ask. Say ask. Answer honestly. Honestly. And then act. If you'll do those three things, you'll be set. But often, one of those things is missing. Either we won't ask the question, we won't answer honestly, the honest part, or we won't act on what we've decided because we don't like what we found, and we'll just ignore it. Technically, it should be okay. And if you'll actually begin to build a framework in your life of answering the 5 questions that we've presented in this series. Next week is the final question. The 4th week is today, 4th question. If you'll ask these questions in those different scenarios in life, you will find that you will live with fewer regrets in life. And so that's the goal. I don't want you to just have some notes in your journal. I love that you have notes in your journal, but I want you to apply the notes in your journal. Act on the notes in your journal, right? You're not just the historian of our city church. We don't want to check your records 10 years from now. We want you to check what you wrote down because something in you was saying, that's good, I want to write that down. Now ask yourself the question, and answer honestly, and act on what you've decided. Apply what you've learned. Now, we call the question today, we call it the maturity question because asking this question requires and is evidence of maturity in our lives. Refusing to ask this question takes us back to the statement from Proverbs. Pastor Chris had us memorize this verse, and Proverbs 27:12 says this: "The prudent see danger and take refuge." Prudent people are wise people. They're aware, they're alert, they're looking, they're analyzing, they're cautious. They're saying, yes, technically that should be fine, but I don't know. I might have a tension that I need to pay attention to. I don't know if I'm being honest with myself. What story do I want to tell? The prudent judges a situation and decides, it's not for me. I need to hide from that thing. I need to protect myself from that thing. The unwise, the immature, the naive, they push through and they just keep on going. The second part of the verse says this: the simple keep going and pay the penalty. There's your consequence. Technically, I was going with the same pace of traffic. Well, why'd you get the ticket? Technically, you were breaking the law. So what happens? The simple, the immature, the juvenile thinking person just keeps on going, and they will pay the penalty. You'll experience it in some form or another. So the maturity question today, here's the question that I want you to ask. What is the wise thing to do? What's the wise thing to do? If you're given a situation, if you are given a decision to make, if you're given a situation to analyze, if you are presented with thoughts and ideas of man, what direction do we want to go? Pause and ask yourself, what is the wise thing to do? What's the wise thing to do? Mature people recognize, understand, and accept as fact that a decision can be both not wrong and unwise at the same time. Are you getting that? We got this line, right? There's moral and immoral. A mature person can recognize this decision technically is not immoral, but I don't think it's wise for me. It's not wise for my family. It's not wise for my future. So I'm not going to make that decision. Why would I? It'll compromise everything. Though technically it's fine. Down the road, I can see where that thing would present regrets. Our greatest regret is always preceded by a series of unwise decisions. And I'm super thankful for the Bible, for Scripture. I'm thankful God knows his people. He knows us, and he designed the Bible with 5 books that we term them as wisdom books. There's 5 different books: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, whatever you want to call it. There's 2 names for it. Be blessed, depending on your translation. You got 5 books of the Bible you can read and go get wisdom and go apply what those different things are, because God knew that in the positions we would be in, it's not black and white. It's not always right or wrong. It's not always moral or immoral. But sometimes you have to step back and be a mature person and ask, is this wise? Is it wise? And so today we're actually going to be in Ephesians. Paul, he's writing this letter to the church in Ephesus, to the Christians in Ephesus, and it's a beautiful story because Paul actually spent time in Ephesus as a missionary. So he went into this city. This was the Greek and Roman hub of God and idol worship, right? This is one of the big cities where they would go in and they would worship all the different altars, do all the different sacrifices, and do all the different things that they needed to do to appease their gods. And so Paul is in this place and he's trying to tell them, you don't need to do that anymore. There's good news. There's there's this man named Jesus. He's the Messiah. He took care of all those things. All you need to do is follow him, and you can leave all of that ridiculousness behind. And so he's telling people this incredible story of who Jesus is, and people are deciding to follow one after another, after another, after another. And there's this beautiful community of Christians who are growing in the city of Ephesus, only they have a problem. At this point, there is a division in this community. And this is so foreign to us, we would not understand this, but there's two groups of people, and they didn't like each other. I don't know if we've ever experienced that before. But there's Jews who had this like original promise from God, the Old Testament and the story and the sacred narrative. And there's Gentiles, everybody who's not a Jew. They're the ones who are in the temples, Greeks and Romans, and doing the whole thing. And Paul, in this letter, he's trying to get everybody up to speed. He's like, hey, first 3 chapters of the letter, he's saying, look, here's who Jesus is. Here's what he's provided for you. You are now one community of people because of Jesus' love for you. So let no person say you're not allowed to worship with us. Everybody should come into the space and hear the good news, the conviction, the challenge, the love, the hope, the acceptance of who Jesus is in their life. You're going to sit next to somebody that you don't like. You're going to sit next to somebody who rubs you the wrong way. That's going to happen because that's what happens when you get a large group of people who represent the city population into a space to hear good news. That's what happens. There's a transition phrase from chapter 1, 2, 3. At the end of 3, Paul says, here's who Jesus is for us. Therefore. And it's so powerful because he goes from getting everybody up to speed. Therefore, this is how we should live. And we're going to pick it up in chapter 5, verse 15. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as... Thank you, Pastor Chris. Got you. Only one in the room right there, the real one. Be very careful, not as unwise, but as wise. Paul says, stop it. Be careful how you live. Don't be careless. Don't be immature. Paul continues with a bit more explanation. Verse 16, make the most of every opportunity that you have. And the language there, if you look at the original Greek translation, he's literally saying you need to redeem or ransom the opportunities that you have. You need to go get that opportunity back because it's going to be gone. But if you will act wise, you can redeem it. You can save it. You can get it back. You can make a wise decision. Don't you wish that maybe you could go back and change some of those regrets that you have? You could redeem. I would love to see the position that my family would be in now if I could go redeem some of the immature financial decisions that I made in life. If I could ransom back the moment of convincing myself that I deserved a new car, and I just approached that a little differently. I would love to be able to go back and redeem that, but I can't do it. It's a regret. It's a past. I can't go change that. And so what Paul is challenging us to do, he's saying, hey, have that mindset so that you can redeem the future decisions that you're going to make. Have that mindset so you can ransom the future decisions. Make the most of every opportunity that you have. Make the most of it. Paul's inviting us to invest our time wisely going forward. From this moment on, you're invited to make the most of, to redeem, to leverage your most important asset. It's your time. But he's not through there. Paul, he continues on with this intense warning. Verse 16 continues and it says, make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Making the most of every opportunity. Be wise, make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. What's Paul talking about? Evil days? Surely our world is so much better than the first century Christians had to deal with, is it not? Evil days? That sounds so far off. We don't deal with that. Maybe if I preached this message a month ago, I would have had to explain a bit more about evil days. But not today. I'm thankful for Pastor Chris for leading us through a time of prayer because we recognize that days are evil. There is evil in this world, and it's coming after you. It's coming after your family. It's coming after your future. It wants to prevent you from living the fullness of life that is available to you. And Paul's words of wisdom to you and to me, so long ago, still so applicable. Be careful. Don't live as an unwise person, but be wise. Make the most of every opportunity. Every time you get home, you better reconnect with your family. You better love your wife, love your husband, hug your kids. You better make the most of every phone call with your auntie and uncle, with your dad, your mom. Don't live in regret. Make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. And we don't know how long our days are. So make the most of every opportunity that you have. Think about it. Have you ever seen an advertisement that tells you, you should make a wise decision about this purchase? Has a marketer ever told you, like, why don't you sleep on it? The finance guy never told me to go home and think about the big purchase I was about to make. Everybody is coming after you. They want your time. They want your money. They want your morality. They want your family. They want your future. They want you for their gain. So you must live as wise and make the most of every opportunity. The gravitational pull of culture is now, not later. Now. It's more, not less. More. I got to get more. So we must live as wise. This is why we must ask ourselves the question. Mature people ask themselves, is this the wise thing to do? Now, wisdom can feel like a very ambiguous subject, and I want to validate that. There's a lot of spaces in the Bible that we can go read and understand it a little bit more, but today I want to break it down for you so it doesn't feel like this far-off muse, this like fairy tale thing that like in a moment, you go, what's the wise thing to do? And then this little sprite comes down on your shoulder and like tells you, this is wisdom. Run from the finance guy. Like it just feels kind of ethereal and vague. What's the wise thing to do? Let me give you a framework. There's 3 different spaces in your life where you can find wisdom for the decisions that are before you. Your past, your present, and your future. And so the full question I would tell all of you to ask today is this. In light of my past experiences, my current circumstances, and my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? In light of who I was, the family origin, where I come from, in light of my experiences in life, in light of my work experience, in light of my ability to not total cars, in light of all of those things in my past, in light of my current circumstances, who I am now, how I feel this week, what's going on in my life, in my home, in my work, in light of my future, hopes and dreams, man, one day, I want to be in this specific place. Now, when I consider all 3 of those spaces, what's the wise thing to do? And it makes it so much more simple if you can categorize it. Let me break it down just a little bit more. Past experiences. Is this a wise thing to do? What's your family experience with alcohol, with anger, with money, with passivity? What's your family experience with taking like too many commitments, overcommitting your time? What's your experience with trying to keep up with the neighbors? Or for the younger ones of us in the room, like when I had to buy that car, what's your life experience? Maybe you don't have past experience. That might be the big alert. If you don't have the experience, maybe you should pause and consider, is this wise for me to make this decision? Because I've never made that decision before. Maybe you should find somebody who's made the decision before and go connect with them and find out. Where are you set up to fail because of something that is living in your past? Now, I'm so grateful that I have a pastor in my life who, before I got married, made sure that my wife and I had legit premarital counseling. Not only did we have pastoral counseling with Pastor Chris, but we also got like legit a therapist to sit down with us. And I kid you not, our first couple years of marriage, like we had a lot of fights, but we had the tools to navigate those fights because in the time and the space that we had, I was able to identify things in my past. She was able to identify things in her past. We could identify things in our current circumstances of where we were. We knew as a couple where we wanted to go in the future. And so we were able to act in some of those situations with much more wisdom and maturity than we would have previously. What's the wise thing to do? The second one is the current circumstances in your life. And you know this, life is seasonal. You owe it to yourself and the people you love to take your current emotions and your state of mind into account when making a decision. Don't send the text when you're angry. You know this. It's not going to go well. Sleep on it. Let it breathe a little while. Go for it. Write up the essay. Write up the super long text that's going to get broken up into 7 texts. It's fine. Just don't send it yet. That's why they instituted the memo on phones. So you don't have to type it in the text platform. You can just type it somewhere else and then reread it later on when you're not so hot. Based on your current circumstances, is this a wise purchase? I've learned that I shouldn't make big decisions when I'm hungry. I should not grocery shop when I'm hungry. I will find something terrible for my health and I will eat it while I'm shopping. It's just what it is. So take into account your current circumstances. Hey, based on where you are today, is this the wise choice for you to make? Is there another angle you should be looking at? Are you emotionally depleted? Is there tension in your marriage right now? Are you freshly broken up or divorced? Is it wise to get back in the dating pool if you just got your heart broke? Like, you need to take into account your current circumstances of where you are in life. Be honest with yourself. Do you have a new baby? Maybe you shouldn't take so many commitments. That baby's a big commitment. I can tell you that. I've learned it. We just celebrated a year. It's a big deal. Take into account. Yes, maybe you may not need to make these decisions forever because they're not wrong decisions to make, but based on your current circumstances, it's not wise. Based on your future hopes and dreams, is this the wise thing to do? Do you have a mental picture of like where you want to be in life? Like down the road, maybe you want to open a business. Maybe you want to own your own home. Maybe you want to move to another state. Maybe you want to move to this state. Maybe you... Everybody online was laughing about that one. Maybe you want to get out of debt. Maybe you want to fall in love again. Maybe you want to reconnect with your kids or your siblings or your parents. Like, you've got future hopes and dreams. Maybe they're not written down. Maybe that's what you need to do this week is actually write down your future hopes and dreams. And then, based on that, is it smart to keep avoiding that person, that family member? If you actually say you want to reconnect, why are you avoiding them? If you want to own a home, why are you still eating out all the time? Like, work a budget, people. Not for me. This is your future hope and dream. Don't do it for me. Do it for you. Do the wise thing based on where you want to be. It reminds me of the legacy question. What story do you want to tell? Well, begin asking, is this the wise thing to do? Now, I said it a moment ago, but yesterday was super special for me. Yesterday, my wife and I got to celebrate our baby girl's first birthday. And we got a little picture we're going to put up. I can't even handle it. And the reason I wanted to put this up there at the end is because I want you to understand the moment was so busy. I saw so many like friends and family and loved ones. It was a lot to take on. It wasn't until the evening when I looked at some of the pictures that I realized, as I was like busy weekend for party prep and then getting ready to come and preach and having a nightmare 2 weeks ago about how bad today was going to go. I woke up with the sweats in the middle of the night, and I just imagined, like, my dream was that, like, volunteers came in and started tearing down the church in the middle of this message. Oh, man. And last night, as all those things are jumbling in my mind, like, I just felt like God gave me this peace because what I understood was that, let's put the picture back up. This picture is a representation. When I look at that, I see the fruit of wise decisions in my life. I see the fruit of God's goodness in my life. It's one of those divine moments when I have a picture that so beautifully illustrates my future hopes and dreams. My future hope and dream for the longest time was to be able to start a family and have a baby and be able to move forward in that phase of life. I got married a little older in life. I was 35. Then we had Charlotte and pandemic and all the crazy of life and what it was. But look at this picture. And I'm just so thankful to God for his goodness to be able to help me understand some of these principles that I'm sharing with you today. That I understood I had to make decisions based on my past experiences. I had to overcome passivity. My wife is not a weak person. She is strong and confident and bold. And I have to step up and fully show up in our relationship because my propensity is to be passive. And that's not what she wants, and it's not what's best for our relationship. And I had to deal with that. Otherwise, that picture wouldn't be what it is today. I had to deal with my current circumstances. My dating pool was very small at the time. I had to deal with some of the issues of what was going on in my current circumstances of life. I was in debt. I had problems. I had all kinds of things that were going to hold me back from being able to find the woman I wanted to marry and set up a home and a family and a future. I had to get out of debt. I had to do FPU and do all the different things that we know how to do as a community. Future hopes and dreams. I had to think through a pace of life. I had to think through what I wanted my family to function as, so that one day we could welcome the sweet baby Charlotte into our lives. And now today, I get to look at a picture that is a representation of the maturity question based on my past experiences, my current circumstances, my future hopes and dreams. What's the wise thing to do? And I'm not gonna stand up here and tell you I made all the wise decisions. I still have regrets. We will all have regrets because we get into phases where we will convince ourselves that technicalities are okay. But if you will lead with these principles of wisdom, you will live with far fewer regrets. And you'll be the one who gets to look back at photos and representations and pictures of good decisions. Maybe yours isn't a wife and baby. Maybe yours is the keys to a new house. Maybe yours is a picture of you and your son after years being reconnected. Maybe yours is, who knows, maybe it's a new business. Whatever that future hope and dream is, you will see it one day. It will be there. And you will have the gift of the moment to pause and reflect and say, that's what wisdom looks like. I didn't know it before. But that is the picture of wisdom. And so this week, how do we take this home? How do we take it into our lives? I just want you to ask yourself the maturity question. Get some paper out. Be honest about your past. Be honest about your current circumstances. Get real about your future hopes and dreams. And then begin making decisions that lead to where you want to go. Because if you don't make those decisions, everybody else is going to make them for you. And you'll end up somewhere that you never wanted to be. And it's a place called regret. And we don't want that for you. Pastor Chris doesn't want that for you. Nobody in this church community wants you to live in that space. I'm going to pray for us. Would you bow your heads with me? God, we thank you so much for, I am thankful that you know us, that you know our humanity, you know the world we live in, and that you have written instructions and words, and you have given us ways of being able to navigate such a wild world. I thank you for the people who have gone before us, who have made decisions, and who we can learn from. I thank you for the goodness of your son, Jesus, and the freedom that he offers us. God, I thank you for the goodness in my own family, that I get to look at a picture that tells me how much you love me. And God, that's my desire for this church family of people. My greatest prayer, my greatest request, God, is that you would speak to everybody today, in person or online, and that you would begin to help them understand their past, Help them understand the present. Help them see a beautiful future. And that they would begin to ask the maturity question, what is the wise thing to do? We lift all these things to you, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Our city, I'm so thankful to have been with you today. Next week, Pastor Chris is going to be closing down our series of talks, No Regrets, and he is going to give you the question that has the greatest impact on your future relationships. So please don't miss it. Go be good to each other. I love you guys. We'll see you next week.